Here, all of us are Daniel. All of us. From the youngest child to the youngest girl to all of us. We're all Daniel. That is why they should never attempt. They should never attempt at another time in our history, another Nicaraguan will rise up, a person who won't have the same thoughts or commitment, the principles that we had, all of you, me, myself. We have bequeathed such principles, and we carry those principles in our hearts and in our minds. The principles that we got from in our hearts and our souls from our General Sandino when he said to the United States, "I will not surrender myself and I will not sell myself." This is a people with a history, an amazing history, a fantastic history. I would say that strength, that steadfastness, it's in our roots. Thinking of the conquistadors from Europe who tried to seize the lands of our ancestors, threatening them with death if they would not be baptized. They threatened them to death if they would not give their gold. And they were sent by the kings of Spain. The Spanish people is not responsible for any of that. The responsibles for such atrocities committed by Europe, and that they continue to commit, European imperialists, that today are talking about investing thousands, millions on war to try to destroy Russia and to destroy China, to attempt to destroy China or Russia, simply because these are nations that has saved humanity, that has saved American citizens, U.S. companies, British companies, French companies. From those who, during World War II, wanted to finish with Russia.
Agrupados para el bienestar, agrupados para el progreso.
And those who align for wellness, for progress. The capitalist Europe is an imperialist Europe. They have had their internal conflicts, wars amongst themselves. Napoleon, for instance, who supposedly was the greatest military strategist, began invading other European countries. And he appointed a brother of him as ruler of Spain. And he continued to appoint governors around Europe. He thought expanding in that way he would grow the most powerful army and that he could go into Russia and conquer Russia easily. So they organized a campaign against Russia. And there he went to invade Russia. Napoleon thought that with all his weapons, with his big army, with all the alliances he had forged with other European empires, it would be a sure thing to get to Moscow. But he missed taking into account the strategy of Russian military. Who, knowing the great distance there was between France to any city in Russia, to any of the main cities in Russia, they thought, how would they supply themselves of food, munition? He thought the Russian people did not have enough courage, and that they would surrender easily. And so he went against Russia. And a Russian general told his other generals that they should not resist, that they should allow them to get deeper into Russian territory, and that when that they had advanced enough, and they would have difficulty getting supplies, and also with the low temperatures at that time, which was something that Napoleon generals did not take into account. And when they realized that they had no resistance on their path and they were advancing and advancing, and suddenly they found resistance. When winter had set in, and they couldn't stand the Russian winter, and they had to retreat. And that was the first great defeat of European imperialists by Russia. They were beaten hard, with no desire of ever launching an attack on Russia. But now, this year, when we celebrated the 80th anniversary of the Red Army victory in World War II over the Nazi Germany. The Soviet army defeated Nazi Germany. And in China, we had at the time a great, gigantic revolution headed by that great leader who is always in our thoughts and our minds, Mao Zedong. We were young at the time, but already involved in the National Liberation Front. We took inspiration from the Russian Revolution and from the Chinese Revolution. There had not been any other major revolutions at the time with such global implications as those two. And those revolutions, both China and Russia, defeated Nazi Germany. And when Hitler was getting ready with his scientists to have an atomic bomb, Hitler bombed England every day. But he wanted to have an atomic bomb because with an atomic bomb, they would not need that many airplanes with small bombs. With just a couple of atomic bombs, he would blow up England. And when Hitler, who also wanted to have an atomic bomb drop on Russia. In the end, when he was about to get his hands around an atomic bomb developed by Germany, fascism was defeated. Fascism has its roots in Europe, and that Europe that believes itself a champion of democracy and human rights, and what Europe has done, fight amongst themselves to take control of Africa and Asia, colonizing nations in Africa. And such colonization campaigns and the wars against those colonizing powers took millions of victims. France wanted to keep control over Algiers, and they rule over the country for a long time. And France lost a lot of French soldiers combating Algiers, but in the end Algiers won over France, and today they are a free country. Whose representative is here today with us. The minister if there was some opportunity for our youth to meet with the minister of the combatants of Algiers, they have lots of experience to share with us, with our youth, for them who have the strength and the energy of not ever being defeated. They could learn more to be able to defend Nicaragua against any attempt which we are constantly battling, attempts of invading or attacking Nicaragua. Nicaragua, along with Central America, became independent from Spanish rule in 1821. Several reasons came into play. Spaniards had a powerful army who ruled over the whole region, from Mexico to the south. However, Bolívar knew how to organize the people and put up a battle until he was able to defeat the powerful Spanish army. And look how things turn out. Look, the things that are being said about Haiti, how badly treated it's been in the press. When Haiti had not become, when no other country had become independent in Latin America or the Caribbean, none of those countries, none of those colonies had been able to win their independence from Spain or France. Haiti was the first country to defeat the French and expel them from there. And the leaders of the fight in Haiti, with great solidarity, supported Bolivar because Bolivar did not have many resources, and he was welcome in Haiti, and they gave him weapons and ships, and that's how Bolivar grew an army until he had the most powerful army in the region, which was the key for the independence of Central America and defeating the Spanish. It was Bolivar. There was Venezuela, Colombia, who were together in that army, that liberating army, and they were able to defeat the Spanish. Meanwhile, in Central America and Mexico, there had been some rebellions, also in Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. But these were smaller nations, and Spain was better able to control those. But when the Spanish Empire was defeated in South America, in a battle headed by Bolivar, then the independent movements in Central America gained strength in Mexico and in Central America. Central America became independent from Spain in 1821. But at the time of independence, there were still traitors who did not want to accept independence. But they wanted to associate with what was left of the Spanish Empire in Mexico under Iturbide. And I'm saying those things because, well, we should never forget about our personal lives and our family lives and our life as a country and our history. We should never forget what happened in the past. Because when we look at the past, into the past, we learn to defend ourselves, because we learn about great treasons and mistakes made at that time. First, with the arrival of Spanish conquistadors, as I was telling you, offering they had a mandate from the Queen and King of Spain to kill anyone who would, any of the indigenous people who would not convert to Catholicism. All of us, we have indigenous blood, some more, some less, and we need to be proud of such a legacy. We also need to be proud of the Mezquita communities, of all the indigenous communities that are along the coast, in the northern and south regions of the Caribbean, where the Europeans who have been racist and have instilled such racist philosophy in their people, they turn our aboriginals into animals, and the peoples of Africa were also turned into animals. They captured them. They took them to fairs to be sold by Europeans, to turn them into slaves. And slaves were not simple servants. A slave had no right to his life when he was being sold to any European family. When they were sold to North American families who used slaves, and they had every right to kill them. They would say they were no longer useful. Those are crimes we can never forget, that we should never forget. Least of all, when those are crimes that are repeating themselves at present times, when we hear so much about human rights and democracy. And the crimes being committed against the Palestinian people, assassinating thousands of children, thousands of mothers, whole families, destroying completely their homes, their hospitals, with patients inside, with doctors inside. That, my friends, we need to strengthen communication networks, as our friend, the president of teleSUR, Patricia Villegas, teleSUR, we have a starting point to raise awareness of the crimes being committed, and that protests will rise around the world, like it's happening in the U.S., against the Israeli government. And that Jewish government has a plan alongside with the U.S. government and with the complicity of European governments who they want to erase the state of Palestine. And they have said it clearly. They've said it. There are confessed criminals. And there they are, armed, armed by the Europeans, by the United States, because they all want to take over all that region. And they're doing it. They're killing every day. And the media in the United States or in Europe are starting to report on the crimes being committed in that region now. But what is the United Nations doing? United Nations is just an instrument of imperialist countries, of the countries who want to rule the world, even when they may disappear. They may extinguish humanity. They run the risk of extinguishing humanity in their effort to rule over the world because they don't care. Bombing anywhere. We have seen how they have staged a provocation, an armed provocation, a plan concocted by the United States and the Israeli government of starting to bomb on the pretext of their people who were working there had nuclear weapons. That huge country, which was the Persian Empire, has 90 million inhabitants. They have a lot of natural resources. And they, following United Nations mandates, had introduced a plan had agreed on a plan to enrich uranium for Pacific use. That's why they have many plants, energy generating plants that use atomic energy, which is cheaper and safer than traditional power generation technology, and they have had the capacity to build those plants. Who has the capacity to build such plants? The richer countries. But when there is a country which defends its sovereignty, its history, a country that will not yield, and they go to United Nations and present a plan to develop such facilities because they want atomic energy, not atomic bombs, not atomic rockets. But then in United Nations, they have an agency for the Atomic Control Agency, which is the one in charge of overseeing the program for enrichment of uranium, so that they comply with what had been agreed. And our Persian brothers started to work, and every 3 or 4 months, members of this United Nations Commission, Atomic Commission, would go to oversee their development. So they were being certified, and they reported that everything was according to the plan, and that there were no indication that they were pursuing building atomic bombs. However, for Israel and for the United States and for the Europeans, that shouldn't continue. Therefore, they organized an attack. Every day they were bombing, and on top of that came the United States with its huge bombs, and they threw their big bombs on places they said they were enriching uranium before what had been allowed to build atomic bombs. To what purpose? Yes, they threw bombs, they damaged some facilities, but there was no radiation in the environment, because if there had been a radiation following the bombing, if there had been any leak, that radiation would have spread over the region, which would have caused disease for people, which is horrible. So what has United Nations done? What are they doing to stop the destruction of the Palestinian people? What are they doing? Are they doing anything at all? What is United Nations doing when U.S. governments, U.S. presidents launch a fierce persecution against immigrants from Latin America? And they're not only being persecuted to force them out of the country, but they put them in jail. And today, July 19th, we are happy to learn about President Nicolas Maduro with his intelligence and strong hand, with no despair, he accomplished to have 254 Venezuelans sent back to Venezuela, their homeland, these Venezuelans had been sent to El Salvador in this war against migrants. The U.S. government has said they will be getting rid of all immigrants, so they will have no more workers, because the immigrants are the ones who do the hardest jobs in America. And U.S. companies are complaining to the government because they are beginning to lose money. So we send a hug to all those 254 Venezuelan brothers who are already reunited with their families. And we give all our love to all the children who were reunited with their families, who had been separated from their families and put into cages. Now these children are back with their mothers in Venezuela. Those are crimes. And what is the United Nations saying about all of this? What is the United Nations doing about all of this? United Nations was created after the Second World War as a serious instrument to provide safety for all countries, all nations, to oversee for the fulfillment of norms and regulations. But every day, as time goes by, and in the face of all such criminal actions, and many more we could cite here, criminal acts made by European governments, by the U.S. government, and crimes that are there to see by anybody. And on the other hand, you have NATO spending billions of dollars to go into war against Russia. And in that way, to support militarily the fascists in Ukraine. Look how the world looks today. The world is going through the most critical times in recent history. This which is happening, NATO getting ready for war, to go against Russia. And why? Because they defend the fascists who staged a coup d'etat in Ukraine, and that's how they took power in Ukraine. And that's why we say Father Miguel de Escoto was right when, at the time when he was presiding the United Nations General Assembly. United Nations, he said, is worthless. It needs to be refounded. And refounding United Nations means to dismantle the United Nations as it is now. United Nations is representing the interests of the powerful at present. Countries who have atomic power, and they don't want anybody else to have atomic power. I think countries who have atomic weapons would willingly accept to have such weapons destroyed, to destroy all nuclear weapons. I'm sure of that.
Bueno, aquí no se raja nadie, ¿verdad? Aquí no se raja nadie. Hoy ya lo estoy agotando. Ya vamos a concluir con unos datos. Aquí lo tengo. Fíjense bien. Nicaragua con Centroamérica nos independizamos en el año 1821 de España. Pero claro, ya habían pasado más de 200 años de dominación española.
Had over 200 years of Spanish rule.
Lograron sobrevivir
and we were able to keep some original indigenous languages.
Con la revolución les hemos dado más valor, más fortaleza para que las clases se den
so that the lessons
y en la lengua de la comunidad.
So the languages of the community
Y que también se le desarrollen proyectos
and also to develop
de educación.
projects of higher education.
Comunidades que están totalmente en el olvido. Y luego también
And then also
que realmente extraordinario.
something really extraordinary.
Hemos construido un
We
tiempo
have built in a
la carretera
record time the highway
primera vez
that for the first time
concreto que une la zona del Pacífico con la zona
that a highway that connects the Pacific zone with the
es un milagro y eso solamente ha sido posible
and that only have been possible
por la cooperación
with the cooperation
de pueblos hermanos, de gobiernos
of
hermanos,
brother people, brother governments,
por
and also
capacidad de trabajo
I think for the capacity, work
de las
capacity
instituciones que están construyendo
of the institutions that are building,
hospitales, que están construyendo escuelas,
that are building hospitals,
las
schools,
viviendas por todos lados.
homes in everywhere.
Pueden ver todos los días.
These you can see every day.
Pueden ver.
Everybody can see this every day.
Les decía que
And I was telling you
en el en 1821 fue la independencia.
in 1821 was the independence.
21 al 31,
From 21 to 31,
42, 43, 44.
41, 42, 43, 44.
Ya 1921 nos independizamos.
And then in 1921 we got the independence.
55, imagínense,
Can you imagine?
nos caen los yanquis,
And then the US government
nos invade
Try to-
William Walker,
invade us.
que venían para apoderarse
That
del río
They came
San Juan
to take control of San Juan River
con empresas norteamericanas, el tráfico de pasajeros de la costa norte
and take control over
a la
the
costa oeste
passenger traffic from
o de la costa
north coast of
este a la
to
costa oeste de los Estados Unidos.
from the US of the north coast to the east.
Estaba la fiebre del oro,
That time was the
los que estaban
gold fever,
en la costa este, donde no había oro,
and those who were in the east coast were there were no gold.
San Francisco, esa zona de Los Ángeles, que estaban
In San Francisco, in that zone of
ahí, que toda la gente
Los Angeles,
por todos lados,
where there were a lot of gold,
empezaron a embarcarse
they started to travel.
miles de norteamericanos.
Thousands of US citizens.
Cornelio Vanderbilt, un empresario naviero, se le ocurrió
Oh,
operar y puso a operar en
a US entrepreneur, he came with the idea to start to operate with a vessel,
de Nueva York
to operate from New York
a la costa
to the
de Nicaragua,
Nicaraguan coast.
como eran barcos grandes que traían muchos
There were
pasajeros, ahí tenían barcos más
big
pequeños,
vessels that bring a lot of passengers.
con esos barcos, y ya llegaban a la zona de
And like this, they came to the son of San Juan.
ahí estaban esperándolos
And there were
las diligencias de la empresa naviera.
the directive of the Navy
Caminamos
Enterprise.
en la diligencia, y ahí estaba otro barco grande que los llevaba ya a la costa.
And there were another big vessel that took them from to the coast.
Se conoció como la ruta de tránsito.
That was known for the transit route at that time.
Eso provocó que empezaron las reyertas en los Estados Unidos entre las empresas navieras
That led to protests in the United States between
contra
Navy enterprises
un grupo de oficiales, soldados, yanquis, mercenarios, y para que apoyaran a una de las empresas.
and they brought
Y
people to support one of those enterprises in the United States.
en el año 1955
And then in 1955,
y empezaron
they began
a pelear por
to fight.
quién estaba pagando a los mercenarios, la otra empresa.
For who was paying to the mercenaries? So the other enterprise was the one who was paying for mercenaries.
Uno en León y otro en Granada. Entonces, había que acabar con uno de los gobiernos.
So then they had to end one of the governments.
Que el jefe de la expedición, William Walker, pues electo presidente de Nicaragua.
So they wanted to. William Walker was at that time elected president of Nicaragua.
Que Nicaragua tuvo un presidente yanqui reconocido por el Departamento de Estado.
So Nicaragua had a U.S. government recognized president.
Nombró embajador a un cura y que el cura fue allá a presentar las cartas credenciales.
So a priest also was presented as ambassador to Nicaragua, and he went there to the United States to present the credential cards.
Unos estaban vendidos,
Some were sold, there were,
no todos estaban vendidos.
but not all of them
Estaban
were sold to the government.
frente a ese atropello. Lo que hicieron fue armarse
So what they did
con fusiles de menos capacidad de lo que
was
traían
to
los yanquis,
gear up with
más calidad.
arms
Se
of less quality.
juntaron con los
They got together,
de Matagal y
and then
ahí estaban los nicaragüenses.
there were the
Ni se
Nicaraguans,
vendían, ni se vendían. Y dieron la pelea y
and
derrotaron
the Nicaraguans
al invasor.
gave a fight because they fought for the revolution.
Yo diría que es la primera derrota que tuvo el yanqui invasor
And that was the first defeat that had the
en toda esta región.
U.S. government in this region.
Luego siguieron obsesionados
And they continue obsessed after that. trying to defeat governments.
Todos nuestros héroes, en la batalla de San Jacinto, el héroe que más destaca es Andrés Castro.
And we have our heroes and the heroes of that
Levanta la piedra
we would like to highlight is José Jacinto.
ahí al yanqui y lo derriba. Es decir, no le dio miedo que el yanqui venía con el
Who was not afraid of that Yankee came with the fusil. And that battle was decisive, led by General After that came another invasion, the other invasion. British invasion. British wanted to control Nicaragua, and the German also. And they made expeditions with very famous almirants. And they also were defeated. That Nicaraguans that was forged with indigenous blood. So Nicaraguans started to defend their indigenous identity. And they achieved this human strength, these Nicaraguans. Won the battle in San Jacinto, and they were reinforced with Indians, with indigenous that didn't have Spanish blood. They were indigenous with a great ambition to defeat the invaders. And I conclude with this data. When the Yankees invaded Nicaragua in 1955, and they were defeated because Nicaraguans, they don't get sold and they will never be sold. In that year, Nicaragua had a population of 200,000, 14 inhabitants. It was a very small country. It was invaded.
país,
was invaded by a country
Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, que en ese año,
that was United States of America,
1855,
that in that year,
ya tiene una
1855,
de
had a population
27 millones de habitantes.
of 27 million inhabitants.
27 millones,
27 million inhabitants
200.000 nicaragüenses.
against 200,000
Y no fueron
Nicaraguans.
500, fueron menos los que pelearon.
And of course, it weren't the 200,000 those who fought. There were less.
En el año el año 1912,
Then in year 1912,
los yanquis, Nicaragua tiene una población de
Nicaragua had
554.000 habitantes.
a population of 500,054 inhabitants.
Los Estados Unidos
And the United States
tiene una población
had a population
de 95.3 millones de
of
habitantes.
95.3 million inhabitants.
Es increíble
It is incredible
cómo un país con semejante población,
that such a country
la
with
potencia de Estados
a
Unidos,
population defeated a
luego
power, a country power like that.
1926
Then in 1926,
que los yanquis invaden
that the United States invaded Nicaragua.
entonces, en ese momento Nicaragua
In that
tenía
time,
una población
had a
de
population, Nicaragua had a population of 600,085
687.000 habitantes.
inhabitants.
Estados Unidos ya
And the
tenía
United States had already
de 117 millones de
of
habitantes.
117 million inhabitants.
Nosotros no llegamos ni al millón,
So we don't even reach 1 million.
bien armados, era una potencia.
There was a country of power.
Se libra la batalla con Sandino.
So the battle with Sandino
Y no
was
pudieron
liberated,
derrotar a Sandino.
and the United States
Que trajeron
couldn't defeat
aviación,
Sandino.
trajeron, tropas continuamente, traían tropas,
The United States sent troops,
7, 8 años de guerra
and there were 7-8 years of war,
y se tuvieron que retirar.
and they have to retrieve.
Se tuvieron que retirar.
They have to retrieve.
Fueron derrotados
They were defeated
en Nicaragua.
in Nicaragua.
En 1980,
In 1980,
en 1980,
1980,
que fue la guerra, el triunfo, el 79.
1979,
Continuaba la guerra. Una guerra que fue
was
defendida,
a war that was defended,
que llegó a decir el presidente de los Estados Unidos
that the President of the United States
en contra, que buscó fondos para darle armas, entrenamiento y todo
that the President of the United States searched for funds
contra
to
la revolución.
train and get funds to the counter-revolution.
Allá a los Estados Unidos y los mandó a entrenar a unas bases militares que habían instalado aquí.
And they were sent to a military base to train in Honduras.
Imagínense,
So you can imagine,
en el año de 1980,
In that year, in 1980,
esa guerra duró
that war
10
lasted
años.
10 years.
10 años. Muchos de ustedes
Many of you
participaron como
participated
cachorros.
as a baby pups.
Estoy seguro que muchos de ustedes fueron cachorros.
Many of you were just pups.
Y el
Babies.
cachorro era el joven que ni se vendía ni se rendía.
And those were the young people that didn't sell and they didn't give up. They didn't surrender.
10 años de guerra.
10 years of war.
Y Reagan incluso recurrió
And Reagan
a
even
narcotraficantes para que le dieran armas
even
a los contras.
talked to drug dealers
Fue un
to
escándalo
to
allá en
give
Estados
them
Unidos, pero no pasó nada.
to ask for weapons.
Y no pudieron,
And they
no pudieron derrotar
couldn't
al
defeat
ejército
the
sandinista.
Sandinista army.
Derrotar a los cachorros.
They couldn't defeat the
Y fue otra
pups.
victoria
And there was another victory
y otra derrota
and another
para el
defeat
imperialismo y otra
of the
victoria
imperialism
para el pueblo nicaragüense.
and another victory for the Nicaraguan people.
Entonces, queridos muchachos, queridos jóvenes,
So, my dear young boys, my dear youth,
tenemos paz,
we have peace.
tenemos paz.
We have peace.
Eso no significa que el enemigo descansa.
And that means that the enemy rests.
El enemigo siempre está conspirando
The enemy, that doesn't mean that the enemy rests, that the enemy is always conspiring.
de provocar derramamiento de sangre.
Is searching to provoke bloodshed.
Tratando de
It's trying to
provocar dolor
provoke
en la
pain
familia nicaragüense.
in the Nicaraguan families,
Porque piensan
because they think
que pueden derrocar
they can defeat
la revolución.
the revolution,
Cuentan con el respaldo de los imperialistas de la tierra.
because they think they can defeat the revolution because they are
Por eso
being
tenemos
supported
que
by the
hacerlo siempre
imperialisms of the earth.
con todas las tareas que tenemos que cumplir, estudio, preparación,
So with all the tasks that we must comply with, study, preparation,
en diferentes actividades, sin descuidar ahí en el lugar donde estemos trabajando, ahí en el barrio donde estamos trabajando, sin
without paying
descuidar
attention to in that place where we were working,
la vigilancia
without paying attention to the revolutionary vigilance.
y que de esa manera
So that way
no le quede espacio alguno a los terroristas, a los conspiradores,
there won't be
a los vendepatrias, porque sabrán
any
cuánto se les
space, any time for those conspiring, for those
captura y se les procesa.
against our revolution.
cuanto agradecemos la participación,
We are so grateful for the participation
las delegaciones
of the delegations
que han venido,
that came,
pueblos hermanos de países
of
hermanos,
our country brothers, our
y
brother peoples that came to
donde
celebrate with us.
estos pueblos hermanos
So these country brothers,
que están luchando por la paz,
that they are fighting for peace.
aquí China es la mayor potencia
China is the biggest power,
y que lucha por la paz.
and they fight also for peace.
La Federación Rusa
The Russian Federation
es otra gran potencia,
is another great power country,
pero no le queda más camino que seguir dando la batalla,
but they don't have all the way that to continue
alcanzar la paz,
fighting for peace,
alcanzar la paz,
to reach peace,
pero no a costa de cederle ni una pulgada de tierra a los nazifascistas.
but not on behalf of leading any piece of land to the fascist.
La República Popular China, la Federación Rusa
So
han sido muy claros.
so China and the Russian Federation, they have been very clear.
Quieren la paz para el mundo.
They want peace for the world.
Quieren la paz para el mundo.
They want peace for the world
Quieren solidaridad para el
and
mundo.
solidarity for the world.
Mueven ayuda para los pueblos.
They help,
Son
they want
pueblos
help for the
nobles.
people. They are noble countries.
No son naciones poderosas que ocupan el poder solamente para buscar cómo oprimir a
They don't seek power just to oppress other peoples.
la esclavitud ya quedó enterrada.
Slavery is already buried.
Y aún con lo difícil de la situación mundial,
And still, with the
con
actual global situation,
potencia como la República Popular China y la Federación Rusa,
just power countries as
que
China and the Russian Federation,
en búsqueda de la paz,
they work together in the search for peace.
en la paz, estamos seguros
And as in peace, we are sure
a las cuales los que andan sembrando el terrorismo por el mundo
so they
tienen que respetar.
they have to respect those who are seeking terrorism in the world. They have to respect.
Tendrá que dar la paz
Peace,
y todas estas situaciones complejas, difíciles, terribles.
all these situations, these complex situations and terrible,
Las Naciones Unidas y crearse otra.
they have to come to an end, and the United Nations will have to be dismantled
Es decir, para poder contar con instrumentos
so that we can count
de
with
seguridad
with-
a las naciones,
options and security in the nations,
contar con instrumentos
so we
donde
can
estén matando a un pueblo,
we have auctions
vayan
and
y detengan
organizations that can
los crímenes.
detain the crimes, that can stop the crimes.
Nosotros, lógicamente,
And we-
seguiremos luchando
Nicaraguans, we will continue fighting
por la unidad, las
for
comunidades
unity
caribeñas.
of the Caribbean nations.
Tenemos que seguir luchando
We
por
will
la unidad de la
we
comunidad
have to
caribeña.
continue fighting
Seguir luchando para fortalecer el alma
to strengthen the ALBA,
bolivariana de los pueblos de nuestra América
the Bolivarian Alliance of
y
the people of our America,
lo más que podamos,
and to
con las diferencias que
and get
tengamos,
close as much as possible to solve any difference that we might have,
pequeños, que estamos más que obligados a acercarnos
that we are
para
obliged to get close
mejorar las condiciones
to improve the conditions of living conditions of our peoples.
simplemente. Si no hay acercamiento, si no hay diálogo,
So if there is not
no hay respeto a los acuerdos que se tienen,
an approach, if there is not talk,
salen perdiendo más uno que otro,
so others will lose more than others.
pero pierden más uno que otro. Nosotros no estamos porque pierde nada, sino porque todos los países centroamericanos, latinoamericanos, caribeños, logremos unificarnos.
We are working together for the unification, for the unity of all Latin American, Central American and Caribbean nations.
Pueblo acabando con la pobreza.
So ending with poverty.